Hello and welcome back to the Solutions Lab. I'm Trevor Schubert and I'm here to talk to you today about Chrome. And the company that's behind Chrome, which you may or may not have guessed, is Google. So I know we've all used it. I know the phrase Google it has been common for 20 plus years now. And I know there's a lot of users of the Chrome browser out there. But you may be familiar with Chromebooks, you may not, but I think we've all heard that terminology, and I think where a lot of that has been up to this point has absolutely been in K-12. And the reason for that has been the reality that this is a very aggressively priced device to make it easy for what they consider the one-to-one ratio or to give a device to every single student. But the bigger part of that behind the scenes has been its ease to manage. That the ability to lock down every individual device because it's running the Chrome OS platform transcends platform in terms of hardware, transcends the spec, whether it's a ROC chip processor or a mobile processor, or whether we're using an Intel-based processor or even AMD. It just works, and it's easy to manage and it's easy to deploy, which is what gets us into the point of the webcast for today, which is to talk about Chrome in the enterprise market, to talk about how it would run in a business. So to do that, we need to first look at the types of devices that are out there, which support Chrome. We've got Chromebooks, which you may or may not be familiar with. We've got Chrome boxes, Chrome bases, which are basically an all-in-one display. The newest one on the market, which is a Chrome tablet-based device, and we also have then the Chrome Bit, which is a small little form factor HDMI stick. And again, the one thing that all of those devices have in common is that they're all running the Chrome OS, an OS which is being updated for free every few weeks with new features, new requests that are coming in, new service sets, and also the ability to support Android, which has been a big improvement to allow collaboration across Android-based apps, or what's known as a Chrome extension, or an extension within the actual Chrome browser tab. So what I want to cover is business class Chrome hardware. We're going to look at the Chrome OS a bit more and the Android compatibility that I mentioned via the updates that these devices have been constantly getting, to include the ability for cross-compatibility with other softwares from the likes of Cisco and Microsoft. We're also going to look at the big piece that I mentioned earlier that transcends hardware platform, which is the management console itself, and how we can lock these devices down for the organization and make sure that only the users that we want can access these things to be able to do what they need to do. We're also going to look at deploying what's known as a grab-and-go station, so that because of how specific we can get with the users, we can make sure that only a set list of users are able to go in, grab, sign in, and pick up right where they left off from their last session, regardless of what device they're doing it on. The other piece that we're going to look at then is the ability to make this entire deployment smoother by deploying white glove services, whether we're doing custom asset tagging that we can manage within the admin console, or that we're doing laser etching, or we're adding some other additional feature, just to make it easier so that once these get to the final destination and get into that business, that they're ready to start right away, they're ready to get to work. And then last but not least, we're going to cover some additional things that we can add on to this sale or add on to this opportunity by adding extended warranties, discussing what those options are, and also talking about business class accessories that run flawlessly on these devices because of how compatible they are, not just with software, but with hardware as well. But I mentioned hardware, so let's take a look at that. Obviously, I've got a bunch of different Chrome devices kind of sitting in this bay here, so I'm going to pull out a few of these and just discuss them quickly. We have business class Chrome tablet from ASUS. This model supports what would be considered, again, a Chrome tablet format, which is a relatively new concept in the market. You've got an Acer device right here. This one's from ASUS. In the end, when it's all said and done, both devices have a built-in stylus right off the bat, so you can go in and do different things. So picture, signing documents or getting additional features one way or the other. That might be the piece that you would need to do with this. But again, I mentioned before the ability to lock this down. These devices are already signed in and locked down to my individual domain, which we'll get into a little bit later. But same OS, whether I'm using it in a form factor that I've got a keyboard with it, whether I'm using a small, what they consider a Chrome box, which is sort of an Intel NUC form factor, or I'm using this tablet. So we've got that. And USB-C is the one thing I think you'll start to see. I might have given away the ending a bit here, a little spoiler alert. But the one common thing that we're going to see as we go up the stack in the business class, and even in some case into the K-12 environment as well, is that we're starting to see most of the power supplies are being swapped out for USB-C, which means we're transcending the ability to suddenly have to look for my power supply, because now I've got USB-C, which is cross-compatible with so many different pieces of the puzzle that, you know, it's just about having that cable and having that adapter rather than the specific one for that brand, which is great. Beyond that, we've got, as we move up, we've got other features. Actually, this is a newer one from Lenovo that's actually got the AMD processor under the hood as well. So kind of more of your traditional form factor, opens up clamshell-wise up to a point, but we've got this thing set up so that, yeah, again, it can be managed the same way. But again, USB-C is what we've got across the side there. And I think towards the end here, we've got, last one I'll pull out is one from Samsung. This guy has got the Intel, and not just an Intel Core processor, but this one's got a Core M3 7th gen, so relatively new one in the mix. What's nice about this particular model is that it also has stylus support built into that kind of traditional keyboard form factor, but then it converts into tablet mode. And once it does that, it also has a forward-facing webcam so that you could do things like augmented reality, take images if you needed to of a particular document if that was the case, or whatever you would need to do from a tablet form factor. But what I'm going to do beyond the hardware is start jumping into, again, I mentioned as we kind of see, they might all be lined up, I wasn't quite looking, but they're all USB-C based, which is, again, the idea that no matter what I'm doing, I can plug in, say, this USB-C external storage piece from SanDisk. I can plug this into any one of those devices, and I'm off and running. Not worried about any compatibility issues there. Charging as well. I can use an adapter from any one of these and charge each individual one. The only thing I might get, worst case scenario, is I might get a notification saying that I'm charging it in low power, but I am still charging. I am still getting a connection. So again, that's what's fantastic about it. I also mentioned USB-C. This is actually a USB-C monitor up here running a Thunderbolt cable right into the back of another Chromebook I have behind here showing this display right now. So if I was a mobile worker and I needed to have a second display in a jiffy, I could bring an external portable USB-C display, and now I've got the ability to have multiple displays wherever I'm sitting, maybe at a Starbucks, but whatever the case, I'm getting it done. That's the important thing, right? Cloud computing at its finest. So let's take a minute now and jump into what the common denominator is outside of USB-C, and let's look at the Chrome OS software itself. So let's take a look and try to sign into this guy right here. So before I show you the admin console, I want to show you why it's so important. What you're looking at is the general sign-in screen. And this is the first thing you see when you give power to a Chromebook for the first time. You take it out of the box, this is what I've got. Now, I can sign into any user that I want to. I can jump into a Gmail user, a corporate user. At any point, I could go into any experience. I could even browse as a guest down here, if you see that in the bottom left-hand corner, which means that experience is completely closed off to that one session, so that nothing would be saved on this device whatsoever from once I exit out of that. Quick little housekeeping note and a fun fact is that, again, no matter what hardware platform we're working with, the one common denominator across all Chrome devices is that they all have a TPM or Trusted Platform Module for security purposes. Each one of the devices has multiple OSs, at least 2 OS installs partitioned on the local flash storage, so that if I do run into any kind of session or have any kind of issue whatsoever, I can boot back to the last working OS and I'm back in the time I just explained that I was back and running. So again, powerful stuff. But what I'm going to do now is, we've got an internet connection. Instead of signing into this Chromebook, I'm going to do what's considered white glove or actual enterprise enrollment. I'm going to hit a couple keystrokes, Control-Alt-E, and you're going to see the screen flash to enterprise enrollment. Now, basically, instead of saying, I want to sign into this, I'm going to Google and saying, hey, I'm not going to use those keywords for those of you that have an Android device handy. We're not going to wake it up. Hey, company that rhymes with, well, Google, I want to go ahead and sign into this user. I think I gave it enough of a pause. You probably didn't have your phone wake up. I want to sign in. I want this device to now become part of the next domain that I sign into. And here's a working username and password for someone on this domain, which is a caveat that we need for any kind of deployment, we need to have a working username and password for that domain. We need to have licenses available, which again, we'll get into some of that housekeeping to make some of this happen. But getting to the good stuff, I'm going to sign in as the admin for this test account that I have. But again, not necessarily sign in. Technically, what I'm doing is I'm enrolling this device. I'm going to give it and tell it this is the domain, this is the password, and if I've got this right, you're going to start to see this screen flash for about 30 seconds. And what it's doing behind the scenes is it's validating through its open Wi-Fi connection back to the Google server that yes, there's a license available to deploy onto this serial number, and that yes, we can make sure that this device is now locked in. So a couple cool things that are going to happen. It says you're enrolled successfully. As soon as I hit done, it's going to start pulling up even like my desktop background. It's going to start grabbing some of the things that are set up within what's considered the admin console. And we'll look at the admin console in a minute, but in the end, think about folders and subfolders. I've got rules and instructions that are set up within the top level OU or the top folder, so that things like the background should be a certain image spill down into every single device. So as soon as I sign into this, I should have a D&H background that we should be able to see. So let me go ahead and just, and the key thing to look for is, again, it says managed by. We'll see it up here. It says it's being managed by this environment, and even down here it says managed as well. This device is being managed by an administrator. What this means is that if the administrator doesn't want you to sign in as a Gmail user or as any other non-employee of this domain, that you simply can't. So let's get in for a quick minute. Take a look. Maybe I can spell, maybe not. Here we go. Now I'm signing in, and this is what the experience is going to look like. Again, very customizable depending on what I keep saying school because again that's where a lot of this has been. But in the business world, whatever the domain is, whatever rules or whatever instruction set you have in place, that's what you're going to start to see. We've got notifications about the Play Store here. We've got a D&H background. We know that we're in the right place right now. Again, it's being managed. So what I'm going to do from here is open up a browser and go to the admin console. That's the other really great thing about the admin console, folks, is that it's all cloud-based. So it doesn't matter what hardware platform. It doesn't even, honestly even matter what browser I'm using. I could spin up IE, I could spin up Safari. All I have to do is go to admin.google.com, and from here, it's going to look for my sign-in, which I already gave it earlier, so it does already know this information. It's got it pre-cached and pre-saved, which is another great thing. I'm handing this to an employee. Perhaps I want to make sure that certain sites are already whitelisted for them, ready to roll. I certainly want them to be able to get into their emails, whether they're cloud-based or whether they've got an app that they have to install. I want to be able to deploy all those things, but I just want them to get to work right away. So if I'm doing this in this fashion and I'm setting up this sort of template through the admin console, which is what we're looking at here, as soon as I do what I just showed you a minute ago and I sign this device into that admin console, this device now inherits all these settings and now it's ready to go. I can sign into this Samsung or this Lenovo or this HP or this Asus over here or this Acer and get the same exact experience in the same settings that I'm showing you right now. So looking at the admin console, we've got a lot of different things. And I want to also preface this by saying that we have a lot of content that we've already put out there through the Solutions Lab. Certainly would encourage you to take a look at some of our previous videos that do a much deeper dive into the specific admin console features and things that you can do, because those settings don't change whether you're using an education environment or whether you're using a business environment. It's just very much up to the end user or the admin to decide what are the right settings for their organization. And there's a lot of things that are already preset. But in the end, if I go to device management, what I can look at is the notification that I've got 13 devices that are currently being watched, including the device that I just enrolled right now, which is this Asus Chromebook Flip. So let's take a look at some of the information that we can get from the cloud related to this device. So I'm looking at the hardware platform itself. I've got the serial number. I've got the MAC ID. I've got a lot of great information I can pull from here, even including a section I mentioned earlier about doing asset tagging. I can put some custom fields in here manually if I want to, or I can do a batch upload of a bunch of information if we're doing a deployment. So to make, again, this easier from an organizational standpoint, if we're tracking things by asset IDs and not by serial numbers, we can put that content in right here. But even under activity and troubleshooting. I can see the recent activity. I can look at what users have signed into it. I can see what volume I've got capacity-wise. The CPU utilization, which is a big key differentiator, again, between what would be considered kind of a typical student device or that kind of sub $200 price point, and some of these that go a little bit further up the stack because we're looking for the ability to support additional memory. This one's got 8 gigs under the hood. It has the ability to do a lot of multitasking above and beyond that kind of 4 gig threshold would be at. And to be honest, I mean, when we're looking at this and we're adding additional apps and we're adding other features and we're doing other things like that, you definitely want a bit more memory, and you certainly want an Intel or a comparable AMD processor under the hood to be able to support that. So moving right along, we can even look at the CPU temperature just to figure out what's going on. But this makes troubleshooting and fact-finding at the remote level capable, and it's something that is really profound. So jumping out of devices, I can go into users for a quick minute. Again, I mentioned folders and subfolders. This is the main root OU, or the main folder, if you will. That's where these devices are sitting right now. If I physically took this device right now and I moved this down into my signage folder, I've got some custom rules and some custom settings within my signage OU to tell this device to suddenly become a piece of digital signage, which again, we did another great video previously on that. I encourage you to check it out. But these are the things that really make this powerful. Within a few minutes, I have this hardware, this brand new hardware up and running and now part of this business. I'm able to deploy it now, and if I've got custom settings and custom fields that I want to make sure that I've got, I have the ability to do that at the user level or at the device level. So let's look at some of the users for a minute to talk about that and explain what I mean by that. Go in, and I've got one active user. Let's go in back to the home for a quick minute. And let's take a peek at some of the users that we have created. So I've got a lot of different kind of dummy names in here and some things. Again, this is a mock environment, but picture this is a small business or even a larger deployment. Perhaps I've got an Active Directory that I want to upload all of these users into. I'd have the ability to do that. I have the resources available through the admin console to be able to do a mass upload. Like here's a tab right here for bulk upload of users, and it walks you through how to ultimately be able to do that. So I've got these users. I can assign specific users to only be able to access certain devices, which will get into the grab and go section we're going to talk about. Or I could make sure that certain users have admin access level, or certain users only have just sort of the basic rights so that we don't run them up with some of the things that I'm showing and some of the features that I can change here. But at the high level, that's where we're at. And the other big thing is that I can also look at, if I go back home again for a quick minute, I can look at some of the apps. So right now, I've only got a few things. I've got, 48 different services that are out there. I've got a few pieces that I've already deployed, and I've had some things that I've been showing as I demo this domain. But it is just as easy as going out to the marketplace, almost like an individual user would, to pull and secure an app. I've got an admin signed into this point, so I could go and I could find the app that I want myself, and I'd have the ability to do that. Or I could make sure that the Play Store is locked out to only a couple of specific apps so that only certain users could get access to it. Or I could just say, nope, let's do away with all that and only give the core set of business apps that I want to the individual users. So core apps like, let's say we're using Cisco AnyConnect as our VPN. Here's our WebEx. Let me find AnyConnect for a quick minute. There's Cisco AnyConnect. I could pull AnyConnect in. I could establish a VPN connection, and suddenly I could remote into an environment, whether I'm remoting into a Windows-based machine or a Mac OS, or I'm running even a virtual session altogether. And just to clarify, I know we've had a lot of things, we've talked a lot about over the years at D&H, the evolution of kind of cloud computing and virtual desktop versus remote desktop. I have the ability realistically to do either one of those things from this sort of device. If I'm using Cisco AnyConnect as an example, I could use this to create a VPN connection to my corporate, and from there I could remote into a physical system, or I could spin up a virtual instance if I've got the capability through Windows Remote Desktop, for example. I'd have the ability to pull that, and actually let me just show you that real quick. Windows Remote. There it is. So For the interest of saving a little bit of time, because I want to get into some other things, I definitely want to just assure you that the apps are there, and just as easily as I'm pulling these in from the marketplace right now, I could at the admin level have these apps pre-baked to the individual users and say, okay, here's your core set, you're in our finance department, you're going to have the ability to remote in on weekends if you need to tweak somebody's payroll or you need to make a quick change to something. We're going to give you that ability. Here's the steps you need to take. Here's your credentials for Cisco AnyConnect. Here's your credentials then for a remote desktop. We can test this ahead of time, verify it's good, and again, at the time I just explained it, you now have a device that has those capabilities. Or let's say perhaps you're using Microsoft Office 365 as our SSO, or we're using O365 in this environment. I could pull in Office 365, just like that. I've got the access. And I could start pulling in those individual users, and as I sign into those, I'd get, again, the same settings and credentials that I'd expect from where I left off. Cloud computing at its finest. So last thing I wanted to show you before we get into the next section, a bit more about the admin console, if I jump through here, is the kiosk mode or kiosk management, and just kind of define the different license types that are out there. In the education world, things are a little bit cleaner. You have in education and nonprofit the ability to purchase one license that's a perpetual license that sits on that hardware for the life of that hardware until it's physically done. Where you have opportunity and where you have some serious flexibility in the business world, as long as you kind of steer the ship and understand the differences, and we're certainly happy to help you with that. Just reach out to anyone from our licensing team, and we can certainly walk you through what different licenses you need for any kind of environment. But you have perpetual, you have the ability to do things at the annual level, you have the ability to purchase different types of licenses, and there's really only two primary. There's the management license itself, which gives you the ability to do all the things that we were talking about as far as the manageability of different apps, different settings, different criteria, different users, all of that. And then you also have what's considered a single app kiosk license. And what you're typically looking for with this is that it's a much more aggressive price point. It's about 70%, give or take, less than the perpetual. But what you're getting is the ability to do just one thing, whether you're signing into a kiosk environment or you're doing, say, digital signage, for example. It is, again, considered the single app kiosk license, and that's how that management would work. But one really cool thing I wanted to address in the management console itself is that there are hundreds and hundreds of different policies in different places everywhere. One of the things I think that's been fantastic about the evolution of the admin console over the years is kind of what I started out the conversation with when we kicked the webcast off, that people are just used to just Googling it. And then we have a search bar within the admin console that we can certainly do that. So if I'm looking for my kiosk settings, I can literally just go into search kiosk help topics, or if I'm a little bit further into the stack, and let's say I go into the device management, if I search within my devices for that saying, I'm going to get a little bit more information. See that I'm actually getting different settings and different things that I could change. So now I'm going into kiosk settings, and I could go in and I could make some specific changes. If I needed to go into the knowledge base, I could go there and I could read up on some of the changes I'm going to make. But if I wanted to go in and look specifically in where I feel like I need to go, if I'm just trying to figure out how to change, let's say I forgot where the wallpaper section was at. I could just go there. I've got device settings, and I can view what my corporate wallpaper is just that fast. Because there's a lot of different places that you could potentially find it at, so I've got to be able to look for it there, and I can hunt for it and I can find it. Kiosk mode, again, you want to give any user the ability, or any person the ability to interface in a controlled environment in your domain so that you can blacklist certain apps, or you can blacklist certain websites. You'd have the ability to do that. Picture like a sign-in at the corporate entrance, or potentially at a doctor's office, you're giving someone the ability to fill out a form. You want to make sure you're doing that on a device that you can just get that experience and just get the information that you need from them and then move on to the next thing. You'd also be able to do that to manage signage and other things, which again I know we've covered in other videos as well. But let's look at the other side of that and do what I referred to earlier as kind of that grab-and-go mentality, or that grab-and-go station. What we have here is from Kensington. It's a simple kind of charge and lock station where I could secure these things physically, but I'm obviously showing you the processes through the admin console to be able to secure all of the hardware on all these individual devices. Setting up a grab-and-go station is just as easy as I've been explaining it up to this point. I would simply go into another one of these devices. I would go through the steps I showed you previously, and I would start to sign in to each individual user and make them part of that domain, to the point now that if I'm John Smith or Sue Smith or whoever I am and I'm working on an important document, I just realized that, oh my gosh, it's 5 minutes to meeting time, and maybe I was in the lunchroom and I happened to forget that I left this one here. I'm physically going to go and grab another device, sign into that device, and I'm right back where I left off because everything that I'm doing is all cloud-based. That's the beauty of the grab-and-go station. It's really just that straightforward. I mean, you can track the individual devices. You can track, like I showed you earlier, you can do some hardware diagnostics on them. But I can make sure that perhaps only a few users have this capability. I want to make sure that only those users have access. I can blacklist or whitelist certain users if I want to within the admin console. At the end of the day, I guess the understanding is to just put them back in where they were, charge them up. That's how effortless this can be in that sort of environment. It's not, again, about what device you're using. It's about what you're doing and what you need to do, and just having something handy to be able to do that on. That's grab and go in a nutshell. So we've shown how easy it is to set up a grab and go station so that any users can go in and grab these devices and they're off and running. All about ease of use. But what if we've got more than a few dozen users? What if we have a few hundred users or a few thousand users or 10,000 plus users? You know, what does that actual time look like to do some of the steps I showed you earlier in this video? That quick enterprise enrollment thing times, you know, a few hundred devices is anything but quick if it's a single person or a small group that's handling that actual process of that deployment. That's where white glove services becomes extremely helpful and extremely valuable for both the end user and for you, our customer, to leverage some additional profit into your opportunity, into your overall project. And that's where I encourage you to absolutely reach out to us at Solutions Lab at D&H.com, at DHSS for D&H Solutions and Services at D&H.com. Let us know about your opportunity. We'll help spec it out per unit to ensure that we're getting the right experience for you and ultimately for your customer as well. But we'll do more than just the actual process of doing the enrollment. We'll make sure that the OSs are updated to the latest and greatest version, which again I mentioned happens every 6 to 7 weeks or so. Currently we're sitting around version 75, 76, I believe. Some units are still on 74-ish, but they typically will start right from the factory somewhere in the high 60s. So that's a 300 to 500 megabyte download that's going to happen as soon as this thing gets an internet connection. So again, imagine a few hundred of these things getting fired up at once. They're all going to start doing what's considered staggering. They're going to start to stagger and pull that update down. But times a few hundred units when they first get their spark of life, it could potentially bring your network down in a hurry. So that's one thing that a good deployment, a good white glove group will do for you, is make sure that the OSs are updated. And then obviously every unit is enrolled, and then we can go in through the admin console if we're given those right level of credentials to ensure that if we're doing 100 units, we're going to make sure that 100 are done. If there's 99 for some reason, we're going to go back and figure out which one may have had an issue during this manual kind of enrollment process and figure out what the problem was and fix it before it becomes a problem for you. And the last thing that white glove does that's truly profound, aside from things that potentially couldn't even be done on-prem, like applying asset tags and scanning against a database, that could potentially happen. But laser etching, unless you're going to invest in some physical hardware on site, laser etching is another thing that we can do at the distribution level to create a custom design or branding, or even just a unique identifier for that physical device as an ultra durable asset tag, if you will. But aside from all of those things, there is always the potential for some sort of hardware failure from the manufacturer. It could be 1%, it could be 3%. It just depends on the price point, and it depends on a number of things. We're making sure at the white glove level that if there is any physical defects or any kind of software defects as we're doing the enrollments, that's a piece that you don't have to worry about. We're pulling that from the deployment. We're replacing that with any stock that we might have on hand. And worst case scenario, if we don't have it, we're informing you of it ahead of time to make sure that we do get a replacement fast-tracked into that project to get it completed before, again, it becomes an issue for your customer. So those are some of the things that white glove does that's really beneficial and extremely helpful. One last thing before I forget, last but certainly not least, is the actual deployment. So again, we're looking at potentially hundreds or thousands of units going out. One of the things that can become a nightmare is, unless you really like the movie Labyrinth maybe, is the ability to recycle all of that additional material that each one of these devices brings to you on-prem. So for example, each one of these units is going to have some sort of physical cardboard packaging that it comes with. We're making sure when we do something known as green shipping or kind of frustration-free packaging, and there's a lot of different terms for it, but the end result is the same. We're taking the inside packaging, some of the foam or some of the bumpers, making sure that it stays on the device, putting that into a master pack, if you will, of say 14 to 20 or so devices into a single box. And now we're making sure that once those get there, that box might even need some custom branding, so that goes to, say, the cafeteria room, or it goes to finance department, or it goes to sales. There's specific instructions that can be placed on every one of those boxes. And then we can also scan the serial numbers that are going into those individual boxes to make sure that within the admin console, we're tracking which OU or which folder and subfolder those need to go into. So now you've not just got the device, but you've got the ability to open this device up and realize, okay, this one's keyed up for my sales department. This one's keyed for my credit department. This is going to my grab-and-go station so that any user can use it. We're customizing that experience for you for a small upsell in relation to the cost of the hardware. And then last but not least, the other piece of the puzzle is, since we're talking business, we're talking about making a more of an investment in the hardware itself above what would be typically considered your kind of K-12 device target price point. We're investing in more memory. We're investing in a better processor. We should be considering an extended warranty from either the manufacturer or from our own EWP or enhanced warranty program, which certainly would encourage you to email us about that. We'll make sure that the resources are available during this webcast to discuss additional warranty options. But the other piece of it is the actual accessories. So I know I mentioned USB-C quite a bit in the beginning. That's what we're really excited about, because we now have the ability to use docking stations that have a simple USB-C connection on the side, that I've got HDMI, VGA, I've got a variety of different things. I mean, there's definitely different states or docking stations that are out there that support different things. Because as the smaller and slimmer these devices go, the more USB Type A gets out of the equation. You may only have a port or two or none at all that I even have A anymore, and now it's all kind of based around C. So here I've got a Plantronics headset up and ready to go on this tablet. If I wanted to set up this docking station, it would just be a matter of plugging in USB-C, plugging in A into that, and then I'd be able to use an audio piece that's a bit better than maybe just a headphone jack from my headset. So we're enhancing the offering, we're building out a better portfolio, and we're making this a better experience for your users. So that being said, thank you so much for tuning in today. Please stay tuned after the webcast for the Q&A. Thanks again.